Over before it began!
The funeral bell tolls for you!
Knowledge is power!
Over before it began!
Ice, heed my command! Feed me more blood! I will come!
Knowledge is power!
Over before it begins!
I found world!
Knowledge is power!
Over before it began!
Knowledge is power!
Over before...
Knowledge is power!
Over before...
Knowledge
Over...
I will...
Knowledge is power!
I will...
Over before it begins!
I found world!
Over before it...
Knowledge is power!
I will...
Over before it began!
Knowledge is...
I found world!
Over...
Knowledge is power!
Ice!
Over
Knowledge
before...
is...
Over before...
Knowledge is power!
Over before...
Knowledge is power!
Over...
Knowledge is...
Over before...
Knowledge is...
Over...
Knowledge...
Over before...
Knowledge is...
Over...
Knowledge is
Over
power!
before... Over before...
Knowledge is power!
Oh...
Knowledge is...
Oh...
Knowledge is...
Over before...
Knowledge is power!
Over...
Knowledge is power!
Over before...
Knowledge is power!
Over before...
Knowledge is...
Over before...
Knowledge is power!
Over...
Knowledge is power!
Oh...
Knowledge is power!
Over before...
Knowledge is power!
Over before... Over before... Over before...
Knowledge is...
Oh...
Knowledge is...
Over before...
Knowledge is power!
Over before...
Knowledge... Power! Knowledge is power!
Over before...
Spout world!
Over before...
Knowledge is power!
World!
Knowledge is power!
Over before.
Icebound world!
Knowledge is power!
Over before it began.
Ice!
Knowledge is power!
Over before.
Knowledge is power!
Over before.
Knowledge is power!
Over before. Over.
Knowledge is
Oh.
Icebound world!
Knowledge is power!
Over before.
Knowledge is
Over before.
knowledge is
Icebound world!
Over before.
knowledge is
Icebound!
Oh.
knowledge is
Over.
knowledge is
Icebound!
Over.
knowledge is
Icebound world!
knowledge is
Over.
knowledge is
Over before.
knowledge
Over.
knowledge is
Over before it began.
will conquer!
knowledge is
Oh.
I will!
Over before.
knowledge is power!
I will!
Over before it began. Over before it
Knowledge
began.
is knowledge is power!
I will conquer!
Over before it began.
Icebound world! I will!
Knowledge is power!
Over before.
World!
Over before it began.
Icebound world!
Knowledge is power!
Over before it began.
Icebound world!
Knowledge is power!
Over before it began.
I'm ready.
Over before it began.
Icebound world!
Mirana.
Over before it began.
Icebound world!
Over before it began.
Icebound world!
Mirana.
Over before it began.
Icebound world!
Over before it.
Mirana.
Over before.
Icebound world!
Over before it began.
Icebound world!
Over before.
Icebound!
Over before it began.
Icebound world!
Over before.
Icebound world!
Over before.
Mirana.
Over before.
Icebound!
Over before. Over before.
Mirana.
Over before.
Icebound!
Over.
I will!
Over before it began.
Icebound!
Mirana.
Over before it began.
Icebound world!
Mirana.
Over before it began.
A chance to try out my new spells! Knowledge is power!
I will!
Over before it began.
Icebound world! I
Knowledge is power!
Over before it began.
Icebound world!
Knowledge is power!
Over before it begins.
Knowledge is...
Over before...
Ice!
Knowledge is power!
Over before it began.
Knowledge is power!
Over before...
Knowledge is...
Over before...
Knowledge is...
Over before...
Knowledge... Knowledge is power!
I will
Over before it began.
icebound world! I
Knowledge is power!
Over before...
world!
Over before...
I will icebound world!
Knowledge is...
I will icebound.
Oh!
Knowledge is power!
I will come icebound.
Over before
Knowledge
it
is
began.
power!
Oh!
Knowledge is power!
Over before it began.
Icebound.
Oh!
Knowledge is power!
Over...
Knowledge is... Knowledge...
Over before it began.
Knowledge is
Over
power!
before... Oh!
Knowledge is...
Over before... Oh!
Knowledge is power!
Over before... Over before... Over...
Knowledge is...
Over...
Knowledge is...
Over before...
Knowledge is...
Over before...
Knowledge...
Over before...
Knowledge is...
Over before... Over before...
Knowledge is...
Over before...
Knowledge is power!
Over before...
Knowledge is...
Over before...
Knowledge...
Oh!
Knowledge is power!
Over...
Knowledge...
Over before...
Knowledge is...
Over before...
I'm ready.
I will
Over before it began.
Piranha.
I will
Over before it began. Over before it began.
I will
Piranha.
Over before...
icebound.
Piranha.
Over before it began.
Piranha.
I will come
Over...
Piranha. Piranha.
Over before...
Piranha.
Oh!
I will icebound.
Oh!
Piranha.
Over...
Piranha.
Over...
Piranha. Piranha.
Over...
Icebound world.
Piranha.
Over before... Over before... Over before... Over before it began. before it began!
Piranha! Piranha!
Over before it began!
I will
Over before it began!
Piranha! Piranha!
Over before it began!
Piranha!
Over before it began!
I will
Over before it began!
Piranha! Piranha!
Over before it
Icebound world! I will
Over before it began!
Icebound world!
Over before it
I will
Over before it began!
Piranha! Piranha!
Over before it began!
I will Icebound world!
Piranha!
Over before
Piranha!
Over before it began!
Piranha!
Icebound I will
Piranha!
Over before
Icebound world! I will
Piranha!
Over before it began!
Piranha!
I will conquer all! I will conquer
Over before it Over before it began! Over before it began!
Icebound world!
Piranha!
Over before it began!
Icebound
Piranha!
Over before
Icebound
Over before
Icebound
Over before
Piranha!
Over before it began!
Piranha! Piranha!
Over before it began!
I will Icebound world!
A chance to... Knowledge's power!
I will
Over before it began!
I found work.
Knowledge's power!
Over before...
Icebound worm.
Over before...
Ice. I will conquer all.
Knowledge's
Before...
Icebound worm.
Knowledge's
Over before it began!
Ice.
Knowledge's
Over before...
Icebound worm.
Knowledge's
Over before...
Knowledge's
Over before...
Knowledge
Oh!
Knowledge's
Oh!
Knowledge's power! Knowledge
Over before...
Knowledge's
Over...
Knowledge
Icebound worm.
Over before...
Knowledge's power!
Over before it began!
Knowledge's
Over...
Knowledge's
Over before...
Knowledge's power!
Over before...
Icebound worm.
Over before...
Knowledge's
Over before...
Knowledge's
Icebound.
Knowledge's
Over before...
I will.
Knowledge's power!
Over before...
Icebound.
Knowledge's
Over...
Knowledge's power!
Over before it began!
I will conquer all. Icebound world.
Oh! Over before...
Knowledge's power!
Over before it began!
Knowledge's power!
I will conquer all. Icebound world.
Over before it began!
Knowledge's power!
Icebound.
Over before it...
Knowledge's power!
I will conquer Icebound world.
Knowledge's
Over before it began!
I will conquer.
Knowledge's
Over before it began!
Icebound world.
Knowledge's power!
Over before...
Icebound world.
Knowledge's power!
Over before...
Knowledge's
Over before...
Knowledge's power!
Icebound.
Oh!
Knowledge
Icebound.
Over...
Knowledge
Icebound.
Knowledge
Over...
Icebound.
Knowledge's
Over before...
Icebound.
Knowledge
Over before...
Icebound.
Over before...
Knowledge's power!
Icebound.
Over before...
Knowledge
Icebound.
Over...
Knowledge's
Over...
Icebound.
Knowledge's
Over...
Knowledge's
Over...
Icebound.
Over before...
Knowledge's power!
Icebound.
Oh, wow!
Over before it began!
The ice world!
Over before it began!
Knowledge is power!
Icebound world! I will...
Over!
Knowledge is power!
Icebound world!
Over
Knowledge
before
is
it...
power!
Icebound world!
I'm ready.
You're the ones looking to provoke me?
I'm ready.
Knowledge is power!
I will...
Over before it began!
Piranha.
Knowledge is power!
Over before it began!
Piranha.
I will...
Knowledge is
Piranha.
Over before...
Knowledge is power!
Over before it...
Piranha.
Knowledge is power!
Over before it began!
Knowledge is power! Knowledge is power!
I will...
Over before it began!
Piranha.
Knowledge is power!
Over before it began!
Knowledge is power!
I will...
Over before it began!
Piranha.
Over before it began!
Knowledge is power!
Piranha.
Over before...
Knowledge is...
Piranha.
Over before it began!
Knowledge is power!
I will...
Piranha.
Over before it began!
Knowledge is power!
Piranha.
Over before...
Piranha.
Knowledge is power!
Piranha. Piranha.
Knowledge is...
Piranha.
Knowledge is power! Knowledge is power!
I will...
Over before it began!
Piranha.
Knowledge is power!
Over before it began!
Piranha.
Over before it...
Piranha.
Knowledge is power!
Over before it began!
Piranha.
Knowledge is...
Over...
I will...
Piranha.
Knowledge is...
Over before it...
Piranha.
No!
Piranha.
before it began!
Piranha!
Knowledge is power!
Over before it began!
Piranha!
Over before it began!
Piranha!
Over before it began!
Piranha!
Over,
Knowledge is power!
Piranha!
Knowledge is power!
over before it began!
Knowledge is power!
Over,
Knowledge is
over,
Knowledge is power!
over before it began!
Knowledge is power!
Over before,
Knowledge is power!
over before it began!
Knowledge is
Over before,
Knowledge is
over
Knowledge is power!
before.
Knowledge brings composure.
Death awaits anyone who looks beneath my mask. Care for a peek?
Only insects grow out of stagnant waters.
Boring. How boring. Only battle can satiate this.
Knowledge is power!
I will.
Over before it began!
Piranha!
Knowledge is power!
Over before,
Knowledge is power!
I will.
over before it began!
Piranha!
Over before it began!
Knowledge is power!
Piranha!
Knowledge is power!
Piranha!
Over before it began!
Knowledge is
Piranha!
Over before it began!
Knowledge is power!
Piranha!
Over before it began!
Piranha!
Knowledge is power!
Piranha!
I will.
Piranha!
Knowledge is
Piranha!
Knowledge is
Piranha!
Knowledge is
Piranha! Piranha!
Ice, heed my command.
a chance to try out my new spells.
You're the ones looking to provoke me? Over before it begins!
Icebound world!
Over before it began!
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 Icebound world! Icebound world! Icebound world!
Over before it began!
Icebound world!
Over before it began!
I will conquer.
Over before it...
I will.
Over before it began!
I will conquer.
Over before it...
Icebound!
Over before it began!
Icebound world!
Over before it began!
Icebound world!
Over before it began!
Icebound world!
Over before...
I will come! Icebound world!
Over before it began!
Icebound world!
Over before it began!
Icebound world!
I will... Over before it began!
Icebound world!
Over before it began! Over before it began!
Piranha!
Over before it began!
I will.
Over before...
Piranha!
Over before... Over before... Over...
A chance to try out my new spells.
I only bury bodies. Souls will at last return to the sea.
You're the ones looking to provoke...
I will.
Over before it began!
Piranha!
Spout world.
Over before it began!
I will. Spout world.
Piranha!
I spout world.
Over before it began!
Piranha!
Over before it began!
Piranha!
Nice. I will conquer all.
Feed me more blood.
I will.
Over before it began! Over before it began! Over before...
I will conquer.
Piranha!